still no condemnation by these corrupt politicians. And mind you, these are the politicians that you are going to vote, and these are the politicians who will be deciding the fate of this country. God save United Kingdom.
I think that in Rochdale, we've had George Galloway going around saying he's going to wipe Labour out of Rochdale.
And he's the Workers' Party of Britain
And
MP
he is the
in
person
Rochdale.
who spins the most extraordinary things against Labour. There has been some selective reporting. It absolutely is not within international law to cut off supplies to a nation. So
you were asked specifically about food and water,
yes,
not just the lights.
Yes.
And you
yes.
said Israel has an absolute right to defend itself.
Do you think cutting off food, water and electricity is within international law?
I think that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself against terrorism.
That's not the question I asked.
It is an answer to the question that you've asked, and I think it's an appropriate one at this time.
Right, so if you haven't seen our latest video of Emily Thornberry being ambushed and absolutely demolished by journalist Ash Sarkar, I guess you need to watch it. The full video is there on iPlayer because the incident happened on one of the BBC's news programs in the afternoon. Now, what happens? I mean, there are a few things that happen, and that should both worry every license fee payer, as well as it's also a satisfying thing that these politicians, when their corruption and when their duplicity or double standard is exposed, see how they scurry for cover. And that's exactly what happened in the case of Emily Thornberry. Now, you remember, Emily Thornberry, first of all, is the shadow Attorney General. So if Labour Party comes to power, she will be the Attorney General. That means she will be the government's chief lawyer. Remember that. Government's chief lawyer, chief legal mind. Now, what was she saying in October? Within days after Israelis' full onslaught on Gaza, killing people, unarmed Palestinians, children, babies, women indiscriminately, she was asked on Newsnight by Victoria Derbyshire, very pointed question. And her answer was that Israel has absolute right, mark the word, absolute right to self-defend. That was her statement, and I will play that, and why that statement is relevant in her ambush that took place this afternoon on BBC. So Jo Coburn, who is the presenter for that program on BBC, and she has had her own share of criticism because of her questionable role as a presenter in the aftermath of the 7th of October attacks, and also the few utterances that she made. But that's not the topic of discussion right now. So she was the presenter, and they were discussing the Israelis' latest invasion of Rafah, which even Israelis' most staunch supporters like the US and the UK have said that they should not do that, because there are 1.6 million people living there and have absolutely nowhere to go, because Israel have destroyed every single part of Gaza. So after being rendered homeless on multiple occasions in the last 7 months, they have now finally found refuge in Rafah. And now Israelis have entered Rafah. They have taken control of the Palestinian side of Rafah crossing. And so therefore there's absolutely no way even the aid materials can go through that crossing now. And they have been killing people indiscriminately. As I said yesterday, in the last 24 hours, they have killed dozens of people. Yesterday, the figure was 21. Today, it has gone up by several more dozens. Now, that was the backdrop of today's discussion on the BBC. Ash Sarkar, who works for Novara Media, she was there, and salute to her. I mean, I've followed her reporting, on social media, and she has really impressed me. I think that gives me hope. I mean, when I look at people like Ash Sarkar, that gives me hope about journalism in this country. So she was asked, first of all, the formation of the panel was quite one-sided. So you have Jo Coburn, who is also like pro-Israel, and the fact that she pronounces Hamas as Hamas. You don't need to be rocket scientist to understand which side of the the fence she sits on. She cannot pronounce Hamas. She Hamas, and you know who pronounces Hamas, right? So she being the presenter. Then you have Emily Thornberry, who historically has supported Israel and has opposed ceasefire in the past. It's a different matter altogether that now Labour Party supports ceasefire, but still don't criticize Israel, right? And then you have Paul Scully. You know Paul Scully, the Conservative Party MP, who had famously said only a few weeks ago that there were no-go areas in London and in Birmingham. And then you had Robert Colville, who is again like pro-Israeli member. And I don't know why he was invited, but he was invited as well. Not that he contributed anything to the discussion, but he was there. So literally you had 4:1. Now when Ash Sarkar's turn came to talk about Rafah thing, she very cleverly, referred back to what Emily Thornberry had said in October. I mean, you have to watch this first.
I'm sat across from two very, very intelligent people, and unfortunately, the way you're talking is treating people like mugs. You can talk about condemnation all you want. You can talk about reminding Israel of their international obligations all you want. But until you're talking about suspending arms sales to Israel, until the Americans are talking about suspending military aid to Israel, all of that finger wagging in the world will not stop Netanyahu from doing what he wants to do, which is launching an absolutely terrible, abhorrent ground assault on Rafah. The images which are coming out on social media at the moment have been for months from Rafah of children buried under the rubble, body parts blown to smithereens. This is the result of Israel being emboldened and effectively being given a carte blanche to interpret its, in Emily's words from October 2023, its absolute right to self-defense to mean collectively punishing the Gazan people.
Well, Emily?
Well, I think that 2 days, 3 days after the first incursions into Israel, when so many people had been killed and there were so many hostages that had been taken, and we were in a live situation.
Well, and there are still hostages.
And we believed, but they were, but it was still, there was still fighting going on the ground in Israel, and there were, as far as I understood, there was going to be an attempt to get the hostages back. At that stage, just cut the lights off and so on was the right thing to do. But as I said at the time, and there has been some selective reporting, it absolutely is not within international law to cut off supplies to a nation. So
you were asked specifically about food and water,
yes,
not just the lights,
yes,
and you
yes,
said Israel has an absolute right to defend itself.
And as I also said, as the guy from the UN had said before, I'm sorry for people who hadn't seen the programme, but for the person who was from the UN who was on Newsnight before me had said, within a short period in a war, you can cut off in order to... So essentially, if they were going to go into Gaza to try and get the hostages back, then in that very short period, then it would be right to kind of... and we know that's what Israel has been doing on and off in Gaza anyway. But in this period, that was the thing to do. Not to do it so that you starve people and not to do it so that you cut off their power so that they don't have water. That's, you do it in a short period when you're defending yourself because you have an absolute right to defend yourself. And that's the right thing to do. But it always had to be, as we always said, within the confines of international law.
I think that's a bit like saying, I want to burgle this house, but in a lawful way. I think.
No.
Now, Emily Thornberry here astonishingly denies. She's saying, she never said, she thought it was only for few days and for short period of time. You can cut off, water supply or the food supply or electricity. That's legal. No, it's not legal. It's not legal. And she said, some United Nations guy has said that, so I was merely repeating. That's also a lie.
What is simple is that whatever actions are taken by a democracy, it has to be done in accordance with international law. And we have heard tonight from the President of the United States that he has been on the phone to Netanyahu, and both of them have agreed that democracies need to act in accordance with international law.
Pause there, if I may. Do you think cutting off food, water and electricity is within international law?
I think that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself against terrorism.
That's not the question I asked.
It is an answer to the question that you've asked, and I think it's an appropriate one at this time.
Why won't you answer whether you think it's in line with international law or not?
Because I've tried to answer, and I've tried to say that we've already heard from your previous guest about what might be happening on a day-to-day basis. So we're now on day 4. And so we hear that there are troops massing on the border. There may well be an incursion. Immediately before an incursion, then, as the permanent representative have said, that it might be appropriate in those circumstances for there to be the sort of action that we've heard about, and then the invasion afterwards. I don't know, because at the moment we're in the middle of a hot war, and Israel is in the middle of defending itself, and we have to stand with Israel.
I mean, I'm not surprised that these people are now resorting to lies and blatant lies to hide their criminality. Because what they said, what they uttered in that period was nothing less than criminal. Because you provided carte blanche to Israel to go and kill Palestinians for fun with impunity. And that's what Israel did. If a party, which is everybody knows is going to come to power in this country, if that party takes a pro-humanity stand, that would have had a different impact on Israel. But Labour Party chose not to take that stand.
Just how damaging is that, Emily?
Look, we don't want to lose people. We don't want to lose support. Obviously, we don't, and we fight for it.
But how are you going to win them back?
I think that in Oldham, Oldham has been slipping away from us for some time, actually, and that is, that's a worry. I think that in Rochdale, we've had George Galloway going around saying he's going to wipe Labour out of Rochdale.
And he's the Workers' Party of Britain
and
MP
he is the person
Rochdale.
who spins the most extraordinary things against Labour.
So as you can see, she's lying now. She was being disingenuous that time, and she's lying now. Now, if you watch the whole interview, I can't play the entire program of BBC here, but you have to go and watch, because there were certain moments when Ash Sarkar wanted to interject and she was not allowed by the presenter. That's disingenuous. If you're discussing Gaza, which is a quite polarizing topic, I think you need to have equal representation. You can't have 4:1 and then not allow the lone person who is going to speak in favor of Palestinians. That's disingenuous. And I think the BBC, being BBC, the kind of deterioration that has happened in the BBC since I left in 2013, that's astonishing. So I'm not expecting anybody in the BBC to pay attention to what I'm saying. But you never know. There might be some, sane elements who may think that, it is damaging their reputation. It's a reputation that all of us have worked hard to build on. And some corrupt elements now have come at the behest of the Zionist regime in Israel to destroy that brand. But nonetheless, nobody is shedding a tear, for this humiliation that was heaped on Emily Thornberry. Emily Thornberry saying that she's been talking about ceasefire. No. In fact, Keir Starmer punished those front page members when they supported the motion for ceasefire. And you're saying that you supported ceasefire. You never supported ceasefire until very recently, when more than 30,000 people had been slaughtered. Then it occurred to you that you should be supporting ceasefire. And even now, what she says is that Israelis are going in Rafah, but they should be careful. No outright condemnation. That how dare you enter Rafah? How dare you? You've already killed more than 34,000 people officially, more than 100,000 people unofficially and counting. How dare you enter Rafah where more than 1.6 million people are taking refuge? Still no condemnation by these corrupt politicians. And mind you, these are the politicians that you are going to vote, and these are the politicians who will be deciding the fate of this country. God save United Kingdom. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.